funny. So thankfully now the state and not the state, but Pearson is providing students with an assessment, with a real assessment that's made by the test maker to see or to, ascertain your preparedness, to look at the different domains. Domain 1, instruction and assessment, you planning instruction and assessment that's appropriate for all students in their myriad diversities. And so it'll tell you in the 4 competencies in domain 1 where you are, sort of nicely color coded. If you're in the green, you're good to go. If you're yellow, it's a little weak, and red, you need serious help. So they didn't have this before. This is fairly new, and they're making it for more and more exams. Like, I just realized that they now have one for science of teaching reading, which is excellent. It's unfortunate that it's taken them so long, but I do want for everyone, if you have not already done so, to attempt this $10 exam. And I'm going to want for you to attempt it for sure before you get sort of clearance to take that next attempt. And I'm going to want for you to make sure that you're in the green in all of those areas. And if you're not in the green yet, that's okay. We will focus and our attention and our studies to those areas of weakness, just like we would with our students in the classroom. And why this assessment is so important, this pre-assessment. Now, we had the PPR benchmark, which until this was what we had found to be the best assessment of your preparedness. Now there's a better one. Unfortunately, they hold, copyright, and it's $10 per person, but I think it's $10 well spent. It's better for you to sort of waste $10 assessing, pre-assessing before you go in for your next attempt, instead of wasting $120 on the next attempt and then still having areas of need that you could have worked on before you go in for the big bucks. So, those of you that have not taken it before, is there anyone that hasn't taken it before ever with us tonight?
Myself, this will be my first attempt.
Okay, and that's Mr. Silas?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, fantastic. So you're coming to us with a clean slate. And the reason this exam is challenging, they are all challenging, right? The content that you have to know is, there's a multitude of it. And then what we do ourselves as a profession is sort of like, there's a science to it, right? We come up with a hypothesis or a goal, which is our lesson, but then we have all these variables, the students at different skill levels from different cultures with different linguistic abilities, different skills, all of those things. And so planning one exercise and lesson and making sure that everyone is supported is it's not an easy task. It's not an impossible task. Science shows us how to do it and the way in which people and students and humans learn best. And even within specifics, in different content areas, how we best learn language, how we best learn math concepts. The exam is written to be tricky, which is why people have difficulty, because first of all, like I said, the content, it's a lot. You have to know the foundational, theoretical framework, of theories dealing with human growth and development, cognitively, physically, emotionally, effectively. You have in all these myriad ways in which the students' diversity or complexity needs to be addressed. And so that in itself, what we have to do is hard. And then they make the test hard by making it a critical reading test, which means they do try to be tricky. They will, put 2 answers that are good answers. One is better than the other based on the words that they specifically use. And which is why I always have students, and why I want students to really look at their standards, to really do a deep dive, a breakdown of this document. your exam is made up of this document and the the technology application standards 1 through 7 are what make up your exam. And each of these particular standards are represented in the domains. Standard 4 is domain 4. Standard 2 is domain 2. Standard 1 is domain 1. And domain 3 includes standard 1, standard 3, and technology application standards 1 through 7. So we were just looking at that right now at the different standards. And this is where they get your exam from. There's no textbook or other stuff. It is from the state standards and the particular skills and knowledge that you need to have in order to be a Texas teacher, in order to design appropriate instruction, in order to create a classroom that is safe, with respect and rapport, that fosters positive climate for learning, equity, and excellence. All of those things for students to thrive, for them to feel safe, be happy, and thrive. For the teacher to promote learning environment by implementation of responsive instruction, the particular techniques that you utilize during your class lesson, after you've written it and prepared it like you did in standard 1, because standard 1 is all about designing that instruction that is appropriate for all students. Appropriate for all of your students. Now, I have had thousands of students in my teaching career, and none of them were alike, not even the identical twins that I had. I guess genetically they were, but not even they were alike in personality, in the way in which they encountered and felt. And, you know, they had similarities, but all of our students have different skills sets. They have different interests, different experiences, different cultural groups that they exist in, myriad cultural groups, right? Not even just one. There's several different cultures you can belong into, different socioeconomic, different developmental, socio-emotional, intellectual. I mean, you have a myriad of difference that you can count on every single year. You have to, and what standard 1 is all about, and the reason why it's such an important standard is because it's the plan. It's the plan, and it's the forethought of your knowledge of the students, your knowledge of what needs to be done regarding the TEKS, and your instructional goals, and assessing them to make sure that they're progressing, because you can't just plan a lesson and hope that they get it and then just, you know, in Spanish, they say, di que te fue bien, like say that it went well for you and hope for the best. We have to check for understanding and make sure that the individual learning objective that we designed or planned for the students, that that we're checking for understanding and for mastery, and that we're making you know, particular choices in order to meet the needs, in order to make it appropriate for all of our students. And the way to read these, one moment, please, because my eldest son just got here, and I know they're going to be loud. I'm going to close my office door. So when you're doing your deep dive, because I want you to do a deep dive, I want you, let me clear my drawings. I want you to print out your standards, this document right here. And if you haven't already watched, you know, a video at least, please do, and do so with this document with you, you know, and engage with, I mean, not engage where you have to do anything except for take notes and listen as though you were there in the class with me as you are now. Now, people take notes in different ways. I, you know, like to write all my stuff out, take, draw pictures for me to remember particular things. Sorry, that's going to be kind of small. I'm going to open this one up, but you could, let me see, begin with domain, sorry, to the side. Each domain and standard and how they correlate. Domain 1, it is standard 1, period. Restated in my own words, standard 1 is all about the classroom teacher, the teacher designing, creating instruction for all diversity, right? For all difference of student that you could possibly have. Using hold on, why is it? Oh, there we go. I'm just gonna, because I'm doing it in my own. Teacher designing and creating instruction and assessment of content, relevant content, but for all student diversity, for all students, for their skill level. And we're going to look at it a little bit larger. Intellectual, social, physical, and emotional development. This means their age group. Domain 3 is your weakest part. Okay. Yeah. Domain 3 includes everything in standard 1. That's why it's hard. That's why everybody has the most difficulty with domain 1 and domain 3. I mean, it's very, 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 very rare that I've tutored someone who doesn't have those as their high areas of need. And it's just because there's so much that's there, and you have to be very mindful when you are reading these scenarios to make sure you're looking for any clues they give you about the students. Any clues about the student, it's highlighted here. If they say a grade level, if they say an age group, they're trying to tell you something about their intellectual, social, physical, emotional development and how that might affect or change or, sort of drive a particular instructional activity or strategy. For instance, we know that EC, early child, up until I think even 3rd grade, and maybe even more, not even 6th grade, the elementary kids, early child, they have shorter attention spans. I only taught, the youngest level I taught was 7th grade. I did 7 through 12 and college. So I never did the babies, but because at the time, my babies were in elementary at the time, and I couldn't fathom being around more, I just couldn't do it. I wanted to talk about literature with some of the older kids and did high school and the older levels in junior high. But I knew that about myself, like kids have a short attention span, and I knew that I wanted to do a older grade level, which is why I chose that. But it matters. It matters as far as the sort of decisions that we make and the activities that we do, and knowing about the way that their brain works cognitively. Those younger ages, they cannot think abstractly. Their brains are not wired enough. They haven't had enough experiences with which to abstract or think abstractly, things that cannot be seen or shown or illustrated. So for our younger kids, we want to do a lot of hands-on experiencing it. You're seeing it all the time because they need it for their development, so that they are able to later abstract ideas. Same thing for math, why we use manipulatives in math, and why it helps so much, because especially in elementary, the students, even the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, are not yet thinking abstractly. Their brains are not there yet. And so sometimes math requires abstraction and helping illustrate ideas and concepts that are abstract are going to make the students master the concept. We have to help them where their brains are at, where their bodies are at, help the people that we have. And so first you have to do a sort of like an assessment, if you will, of your students. Who are they? What do they need? But we don't want to come to our lessons and our classes or students from a deficit sort of perspective. We want to look at, like, what do they come with as assets? What are their skills? What are their needs, their interests, their backgrounds, characteristics? And every student's different. I know I was vastly different, and I'm still a different type of student. I learn a certain way. I mean, I went to graduate school for a very long time. I have 2 master's degrees. So I never changed being a different student from the way that I was a student in like high school. I was still that person. And so too are, you know, a little bit you guys. If any of you guys have testing anxiety and you had that as a child, those things don't just evaporate when you get that diploma, when you graduate, or when you become an adult. And so we need to work with the students where they are. And so certainly if a student tells us, you know, that they have a certain preference, like I like to sit in the front of the classroom, or I you know, like to have hard copies of notes also because I have really bad handwriting. Even though they're not special ed, what difference does it make for you to print out the notes if you know they actually do have terrible handwriting? And so for some children, that's part of a disability, dysgraphia. It really affects the student's ability to take notes. And those special ed students, if they have that, then you certainly need to be making sure that you're not taking off points for their note, and then you're not even frustrating them to try to do it, because it's not good to fail, and they know they're already going to fail because it's part of their disability. So know your students, address their needs specifically, make it as easy and awesome as possible. They should be excited to go to your class. I used to be, when I first, you know, started teaching, I was very young. I had just turned, or I turned 21 my first year teaching. So for part of it, I was 20. And I always, I mean, I got better as I went on. I certainly wasn't like, didn't do everything right from the very beginning. My wait time was terrible. And that's something that, you know, you need to extend your wait time and give your students, especially if they're ELL students, time to respond. But more and more, as I became, you know, a veteran teacher, if you will, I started to care less about how other teachers perceived if students enjoyed my class or not, because there were some teachers be like, oh, everybody just loves going to your class. Yeah, they do. And we learn, and they're writing, and our scores show that. So you want them to want to come to your class. But for good reasons, obviously, because you value them, because you're reading things that they are interested about. I was a reading teacher, and so I know reading is not fun for everyone. It's not everyone's favorite thing, but we got to do it, and we have to analyze it even. But I always try to take their interests, their goals, their ideas, and in some way utilize them in my planning and in the types of reading that we did, to show I care, and this is your education. And, you know, you're really into that, you know, Victorian age, and we're going to read some poetry or whatever it is. You know, I had some students that were into anime, and so I made sure to add that to my student library so that they had that for silent sustained reading, which is something that needs to be done, you know, every week. It's in our TEKS. So but if you're gonna silently read, no one's checking on you, you're much less likely to do it if you're reading something you don't enjoy or you're not interested in. So you're more likely to do it if you're reading something you already have said you have an interest in. It's that internal intrinsic buy-in. Speaking of these buzzwords that I'm using, I want to make sure that you guys are utilizing the resources in your folder. So this handy dandy, ridiculously old document I got this copy, I believe, while I was supervising an intern in 2012. And it was already old and out of print then. She just had a copy and I got a copy, and so this is what we have. And so many people off the internet just want to buy it, but that's illegal and against copyright. Like, you can't. I just use it for educational purposes, and I'll give it to you for free, but that's about it. It's really great still, even though it's very old, because it has the domain 1 here. Some of the areas are really small. You can see how old this is because look how small the technology section is. Look how short and small. You now have 7 whole standards. And if you go look at the standards documents, it's a lot. There's a lot of standards and a lot in there. You don't have to have it memorized, but you certainly need to have read through it and see what is it that I am responsible for knowing and being able to do with my students. So if you want to refresh your mind on why we make different decisions, 7 through 11 years old, they're concrete, operational. Begin to consider other viewpoints at this age group. They apply logical thought to concrete objects, not abstract. Their understanding, their logical understanding is applied via concrete objects. Understand reversibility and transformation. Understand that an object has same quantity even if the shape changes. Begin inductive reasoning and classification. Then you have formal operational, and that's 11 years plus. And this is, they're developing it. They don't have it exactly at 11, right? Abstract, higher order thinking. Are they getting better at it? Yes, their brain should have more neurological pathways with which to abstract ideas and think about things. You have physical development and maturation. Development can be affected by nutrition, sleep, abuse, illness, stress. And so those are things, you know, that students will come to us with, traumas and stresses and whatnot, and they still have to succeed in your class. You have to find a way to ease the chaos and support them, make them feel safe and happy enough for them to thrive in your classroom. And let me tell you, for sometimes, you know, when kids are experiencing abuse or whatever, that's hard. I mean, what about, you know, any rational person makes me think that if somebody's, you know, parents are abusing them, that they care at all about the author's tone in poetry, right? That's like the least of their problems, and their brain is literally in a mode of sort of fight or flight, shut down, and not okay then. So we have to find ways of supporting them and making them okay and able to still accomplish those same learning goals. So here is that section, psychosocial development, and we're going to be dealing with mostly industry versus inferiority, can feel satisfied in successes, identity versus role confusion, can develop identity. That's when they're developing that identity. And you know, 6 to 12 years, and especially during those puberty ages, do we have this like awkward and sort of self-conscious view of ourselves, right? Unsure of who we are in the grand scheme of things, right? And that can be exacerbated by, again, unsupportive parents and teachers who make them feel unimportant, like they don't have a voice. I just had a session, or maybe it was with you, Sylvia. Were you telling me that they want the kids to be quiet still?
Yes, and some of my older colleagues, they have that tendency to think like the kids cannot, like, you know, talk a lot,
Right.
that it's not a good thing. So, and in my classroom, my kids are not super loud, but they love to communicate, and because I teach pre-K 4, so I'm very like, I've learned a lot with you about the whole communication to allow them to express for their oral language and so on and so forth. So my class is pretty loud, and I'm in the section of like the first and second graders. So it's kind of like they're like, oh my goodness, like they talk a lot. They're so fluent in their like in their oral language, and I'm like, because I allow them to. I allow them to have a
Absolutely.
voice. Of course, I let them know, hey, like whenever they're too loud, it's like,
Right.
guys, like the bigger kids are doing a test and so on and so forth, and they kind of mellow down. But I allow them because I'm like, I learned that from you, and it's good because I've noticed a growth from when we started till now. And it's like, because I think I do strongly believe that it's because of how they're able to express themselves, to be themselves, and like, so on and so forth. So
Right. Practice. And they probably feel so excited and happy to go to your class every day, like just excited and happy to be there, and I have had my own children say like, oh, I don't like school. And I'm like, what? But it's the teacher wanted everyone to be quiet. This is my own first grader right now. Her kindergarten teacher would scream a lot. She's an older lady. She yelled a lot. And apparently my other child didn't have her, had someone else, but like knows about her yelling and could hear through the walls in her classroom. And I just think that's so ridiculous because I mean, I don't yell at them. And so I don't like the idea of other people yelling at them as well. And I think there's a better way of quieting your class down, especially in kindergarten. We certainly don't want for them to not like school. That's sort of preposterous. I loved school in kindergarten. It was so fun. I feel like it wasn't even really school. It was like much less structured, and they certainly weren't doing science of teaching reading stuff with me. But we did get to talk a lot, and we got to learn. And what we did learn was social emotional intelligence, how to share like different stations with different groups of people. So it was a lot less academic, if you will, but we want the students to be practicing their language. This is important for traditional native English speakers and our ELL learners. It's important for them too. The basic interpersonal communication skills, these here, the BICS, that's what you're building right now. And you're also building academic language with your kindergartners and allowing them to practice and talk about the things and ideas that you've been doing and their own ideas, and it's as it should be. So I'm really glad to hear that you're doing that. You should gently encourage your colleagues, to practice, because we want them to ask us questions. We want them to feel comfortable talking, to have high oral language proficiency skills, good listening and speaking skills. So lots of opportunities where I'm talking to them and they're having to like listen for a message, and likewise with partners listening for a message. And let me see. I was talking about this before. Again, another theory, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We know already that a student cannot learn. It's like science. It is, fact that a student cannot achieve self-actualization, where they're able to self-actualize. They're an agent of their own learning and achieve personal achievement and fulfillment if the other areas preceding are not fulfilled. Psychologically, the psychological needs of food, water, shelter, and warmth, those learning will not take place. Safety, if a student doesn't feel safe at home, if they don't feel safe in your classroom. And I have actually been in classrooms where, and don't do this, I know it's hard because we're people too, and some of us are not confrontational. And so maybe you'll hear a student say something mean and it was sort of under your breath, and rather than draw attention to it, you ignore it and hope that it doesn't happen again. But that can't happen. It needs to be addressed, because you want for the student that was being told these mean things to feel comfortable in your classroom, and they know you're not deaf. And I was, like I said, I have been in classrooms where I've had to say, I heard this student say this. I don't know if you heard them or not. I'm positive that she heard them, because if I heard them, she for sure heard them. But her not addressing it right then and there really sends a bad message to both the bully and the bullied. And it even the person not being bullied, everybody else, like, oh man, it could be a free-for-all, and I could, have people say things to me, and she's not going to say, keep me safe. It's not a safe environment for me. And once you do that, you lose a lot of credibility, and the human brain, think of it as like a scared cat, and these kids trust us, and when we lose their trust, it's hard to get back. When they get hurt by our carelessness, and sometimes it's not even on purpose. I'm telling you, because I have over decades of teaching have accidentally hurt students' feelings, and I never want to hurt a student's feeling, but just because I'm in a grumpy mood and I was short with them, and I'm always so kind and sort of nurturing, that and was that type of person, like a short and few and far between in that student's life, that it really was sort of hurtful. And I had to say, I'm so sorry, I left my copy at home. Haven't had lunch yet. I'm sorry, I shooed you away, but did you, I wanted for them to know, and for me to apologize and explain myself, because they're human beings. And a lot of times we are the only sane, sort of supportive person in their life. Not for all of them. Many of them come from happy, healthy homes, but some of them, just out of necessity, are a lot of times left alone. Their parents might be working multiple jobs. They're in a one-parent household. They live with elderly grandparents. They live with their tia, who also works. I mean, so there's a lot of things that are going on. And regardless of that, we have to make it an environment where the kids can thrive. The environment making part of it is domain 2, right? Standard 2. So let's continue going with this. And you have diversity, and it's also this really small section on diversity, but diversity is like so big and it's so important. And I'd like for you guys to think about diversity, diversity equaling difference, right? Any nuanced difference of your student, they're not the same. They're like each perfect little, I don't know, something snowflakes. Not one of them is the same, not even if they're twins. So, the way that they have seen the world, the way that they connect with the world, the way that they feel about the world and their place in it is going to be different. You have to make sure that you are aware of your own biases, and that you recognize how student diversity in its myriad forms, because there's so many ways your students can be different: socioeconomic, gender, cultural, developmental, skill level, behavioral, family involvement, the family expectations. I've had parents that have straight up told me, like, all we really care about is sports. Like, as long as he can play, on the varsity basketball team, we're good. Like, that's all we want. Like because I'm trying to push them, to help me push their son to get A's, because I know that they're capable of that, but their family doesn't value that. And so that makes it a little bit difficult. So I have to figure out a way to get them to the student to be excited, maybe bringing in more basketball related texts or research projects or whatever to get that buy-in. Making sure that we're not, coming to our class, coming to our lessons, coming to our illustrations, examples, activities from an ethnocentric perspective, right? Just from our own experiences and our own culture. We have got to take the students' culture and who they are, and not just, like, when I say culture, it's not just their race or ethnicity. I'm talking about there is a culture with different levels of socioeconomic, different genders, and different areas. Even like I was saying right now, with that group of like the super athletic parents / kids they do all like sports camps, that's a type of culture, and they're involved in it, and there are particular things that I already know what to expect of these types of students. They're going to be going on a lot of out of town on weekends to do the select games, blah blah blah, and projects are going to not be high on priority. And so a lot of stuff is, I have to make time for a lot of stuff in the classroom to make sure that they're still able to get the most out of the things that we're going to do together. So taking everything into consideration and having high expectations for everyone, regardless of if they're special ed, regardless as if they're learning English as a second language, regardless of any difference or diverse factor, that we provide educational equity always. Fairness, and this includes fairness in seating, fairness in wait time. I think it important to let the students choose sometimes where they sit, but also remember where students sit makes and depending on if you're doing particular activities, which you should be doing, like think, pair, share, turn to your partner and discuss the question where what you just wrote about, or the answer to your equation and what steps you took or what math processes you took in each step, and turn to your partner. And I like to seat my students so that they are resources to each other, so that when they do pair with their neighbor, it is going to be someone who is going to learn from them, and that other person is going to benefit from having that extended rehashing of knowledge. And but you also want to give them a choice sometimes. And if a student says, listen, I'm sitting like in the middle of the class, but I would really like to sit in the front. And this is something that I mentioned because it was something that I needed. It's something that I did all through college. Every single class I sat in the first. In fact, it would be annoying to me if I was late, because I taught when I was going to graduate school. So many times I'd be late, and I wouldn't get my first seat. And it's just like, I really need it. It's a thing that I need, because I didn't know this then, but I'm ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 40. And so even as a student in elementary, I remember asking my third grade teacher if I could sit in the front. She had me sat in the back of the class. It was actually fourth from the back. Like the fourth last, the fourth in the row, but there was only 5 in a row. So I wanted to be in the front near the board, and we were in these like small little portable rooms. And yeah, she just said flat out no. I had to sit. And which, now that I think about it, was such a ridiculous response. I wore glasses. I mean, I was so kind about it. And but she really liked her seating arrangement. Don't be a crazy person with your seating arrangement. It is not the end of the world if somebody comes to you with a particular request. Somebody isn't a student. And remember, their education is their own experience, which is such a valuable and should be a beautiful thing, that they can look on and say, man, I had good teachers. I had really cool teachers that like tried and really cared about us. That's what they should say. If they leave a class not saying that, you didn't do it right. They have to feel like you care. If they feel like you care, they will work so hard and just jump over the moon for you, walk through fire for you, not to meet those goals, because you believe in them, they'll believe in themselves. So educational equity, it includes fairness in seating, wait time. Don't be quick about it. Give an extended wait time after you've asked a question, whether in one-on-one or in group discussion. And this is something I didn't know. And when I was a first-year teacher, my mentor, Miss Payson, rest in peace. She's passed now. She was the sweetest little old lady. I was a 7th grade reading teacher. And so, man, I thought my lesson had gone so great. And she did say it had, but she had a critique for me. And it was such a good one. And I'm so glad that I learned it that first year, and that I didn't go years and years like I had been going, the weeks that I'd been teaching. But she said, Stephanie, you have to extend your wait time when you're asking questions, because at the end, after we did our reading, after I was checking for understanding, what I was really doing was calling on people until I got a right answer, so that I could feel like I did it, somebody got it, instead of saying, okay, Sarai, what would you say, or identify for me some words that helped you choose the tone in this poem and not giving enough time, moving on very quickly and saying, okay, what about you, Jose? Can you tell me? And then waiting only 5 seconds. Well, plus 5 seconds is nothing. But, kind of a little bit when you're being observed by someone, you get a little bit nervous, right? And you get the nerves and you move a little bit quicker. And that silence was deafening to me. But her telling me that, and especially because I did have a lot of ELL students, she said, especially back then they called them EL students. But hold on, my phone is ringing. I had a lot of ELL students, and so therefore, not only is this extended wait time important for native English speakers, just like I've asked anybody a question, I need to wait for a response. So you can go through your brain and then articulate a response for me. And it's not robotic. We are not machines. So that extended wait time is important. More important for ELL students. It's important for everyone, but especially with ELL students. Science says we're going to get better responses from all students, but this is especially necessary and true for ELLs because they have to translate from their language, make connections, and then formulate their response in English. So making sure your wait time is not too quick, that you extend it, and that you're being equitous or equal with your wait time with everyone, right? You don't just move on from particular students if they're taking too long and like giving up on them. Verbal and nonverbal cues. Educational equity. That means you don't roll eyes at students. You give everybody, their accolades. And that's something I always tried to do. I mean, and I have had some students that were on BIPs, had major behavioral defiant issues. And I always tried to find ways of affirming the good things that they did. And so sometimes it was very small as like someone coming in and sitting down without making a ruckus, If that happened, I was going to go over and whisper, Tomas, I saw you come in today. You just went in and started writing the word of the day. I like how you do that. Give him a little high five. Like, it might seem ridiculous, like, oh, you're cheering this person on because they came in and did what they were supposed to do. Some of our students have different challenges, different needs. And so I am going to make sure that I am finding ways to be positive with all my students, even the ones that are more difficult, and especially those finding ways to highlight positive behaviors that they show, because then they get sort of addicted to me doing something good and somebody acknowledging it, or just feeling, eventually hopefully they just do it anyway. But we certainly want to make sure that we are, with our verbal and non-verbal cues, that we are being like equal, that we're being smiling at everyone and not making faces at the kids that are a little bit more difficult. And, sometimes things are unconscious, right? I think I've probably rolled my eyes unconsciously at a ridiculous notion that somebody asked me or something, but you can't really, because these are children and they're remember, we go back to the theory, their sense of self isn't even like in place yet. Their brains aren't even fully developed. And so when an adult and a person of power is unfair, mean, it stings in a way, and especially for teachers, it decreases our ability to be effective teachers with them. We have to be equal with our praise, right? Try to praise everyone. I know some of them are going to make you like reach, but you've got to do the reaching. Making sure everyone has equal access and practice to technology. And this is stated here more so because, like, back in the day when this was printed, you had to, like, make an appointment with the computer lab to take your class for somebody. This was before they had cows, which were computers on wheels, the laptops, and then now they have iPads on wheels, I think. So now there's much easier access to technology. Before, it was a much bigger issue, and it is our job to make sure that the students have adequate access and practice doing those skills that we know they're going to have to use. Technology is ubiquitous with everything we do. I wish that it weren't. Like, I literally think back so fondly to days when I didn't carry around a phone with me 100% of the time. It's exhausting. I always get emails, I'm always available. And I just want to go back to the days where there was a landline. I just really wish, but those days are gone. And luckily, a lot of good things come with this access and our technology, right? The access to so much information, to so many ideas, visuals, museums, for us to utilize to help illustrate the concept, knowledge, and skills of the students. We want to have same expectations for everyone. We want to encourage the students to interact with those of different cultures and level abilities. It is our job to make them be able to see the very important, necessary function of diversity in society, even on a biological level. And when I make my small learning groups, I'm going to carefully craft them to make sure I am putting different skill levels, different linguistic levels, different socioeconomic levels, different cultural groups together, so that when they talk about the concepts, knowledge, and ideas, skills, and try and practice the skills, that they are having conversations with people with different ideas, different perspectives. The different is what makes us learn better. The difference is what makes us see something from a different perspective, and maybe it makes it more understandable or makes it resonate with students more. So we need to better get our students acquainted with dealing with students that are different from them, right? And becoming a community of learners together, and seeing the value in their different skill sets, in their different perspectives, prior knowledge, and experiences. Student motivation. Student motivation is a very big topic. You will get a question for sure that says, how can you increase the student's motivation? So extrinsic, you have the X here. Extrinsic is external. That's the easy and very fleeting. It's the cheap and fleeting form of motivation. Stickers, candy, playtime. So back in the day, before there was a huge change in like the regulations with the food that you could give, I would give my students when they met their goals, hot Cheetos and cheese, at the end of the week. Those are external and they work pretty well, but the real goodie comes from intrinsic. Has the word inside of it because it is internal. It comes from you inside, and that is the most fruitful and beneficial motivation. If you can harness the power of intrinsic motivation within a student, then you've won half the battle. You have their buy-in, their want to be motivated. Their want to do the thing. And so this can come from a love of learning, natural curiosity, or I'm going to write another word for this, interest. So if I'm going to have research papers due for my seniors who have senioritis, in order to get them motivated to do this assignment to the best of their abilities, I'm going to make sure I give them choices with topics that I know that they already have interest in. Like I said, I know I had a lot of sports kids, so I'd come up with some pretty interesting sports related topics for them, and have a wealth of things that they can choose. So their power and choice plus their natural curiosity. Like if they chose it from a list, or if you, I like to give lists because then people get too crazy and I have to tell people no, like, no, you're not going to do your research paper on that. But I will create a list based on what I know of my students, and I know them very well. I make it my job, like within the first 2 weeks of school, to know them very, very well. Because how can I plan for them if I don't know them? How can I help them if I don't know who they are, what they like, where they're at, how well they speak? So I'm having conversations with them all the time, asking them about themselves, having them write things, having them do interest surveys for me, so that I am like snooping in who they are, so I can know what is my way in the door, what is my entry to get their internal motivation turned on. So I'll make a list of different topics that I know my students are already interested in. And I'll put a few so they feel like they have a choice, because students always want to feel like they have a choice. You should always give them a choice. If you're giving them an assessment, give them 2 choices. You can do one in written or you can do one in oral. Sometimes I would have them do that. If I wasn't specifically assessing their writing skills, why do I care if you have to write it down in a complete sentence? You can tell me, the theme of the story orally. We can do it one-on-one. You can illustrate it for me. I mean, you choose the way you want to shine. It's your choice. That choice, that natural curiosity, or that interest in that particular way of assessing, and allowing them to use their strengths, ignites that love of learning, gets them to feel like they have agency in the learning, and it makes it more meaningful. Positive and negative reinforcement. You guys know about that. So anytime you want to get motivation, you want to use their interests, what you know about them, natural curiosity. Get them to love learning by doing things that are important to them, by doing things that resonate with them, that have meaning, that, are apparent in their real world. Like it's something important in their real world. Here are the different learning styles. And this, again, still goes to diversity here. So you have this is still diversity, right? Students are going to be motivated in different ways. So you're not going to be able to plan a nuanced difference for everyone. Of course not. But you certainly want to try whenever possible to get that buy-in, to utilize the different visuals, learning methods and tools for the different learning styles. Remember, all of our students are different. I'm different. Each and every one of you are different. And so we have auditory learners, people who they need to hear it explained to them explicitly. And so tapes, discussions, stories, oral instructions, conversations are really important for that student's learning, for their brain. It is the way in which their brain prefers to learn. And we're usually multimodal, right? We have, it's like a combination. Visual. So many of us are visual. I'm visual. I like to see what I'm learning. If you can show me, please do. Why wouldn't you if you can show me what you're talking about? I want to hear it, see it, and I want to also touch it and do it. I want to do all of them. But we have students who like to learn or need that an extra portion of it for their brains to really solidify that knowledge as knowledge that can be retrieved at a later time. So auditory, visual, they need to see things, drawings, demonstrations, graphics, videos, written instructions, tactile or kinesthetic, touching things, movements, manipulatives, art projects. Manipulatives are really good to use in math. They're so really great. They really help differentiate a lesson for tactile and kinesthetics. They're also visual, but the tactile visual is so great to help illustrate, like I said, abstract concepts to students that are in that age where their brain is not yet doing abstraction as easily as the junior high and high school students will be doing, late junior high and high school. Learner, impulsive, reflective, and then you have these other things that aren't that important. These are some ELL terms. This is not all you need to know. We have this Alps instructional tool, and many of the videos I go in deep detail over this document, explaining what it means for your instruction to be focused, targeted, and systematic. Remember, you have your, let me get my annotations up. When you plan your lesson, you have your learning objective, right? And it comes from your TEKS. You see in your TEKS, and then you're going to try to do many of the things or grouping of them, and the student will do this thing. But in addition to that, you have language objectives as well. And that comes from this document. You have listening, speaking, reading, and writing objectives. Every day you are practicing the student skills in a focused, targeted, and systematic way. The language skills in listening, speaking, reading, and writing every day, in addition to whatever learning objective you're doing, right? The learner will, divide using rational numbers, or the learner will be able to explain the difference between rational numbers, integers, and whole numbers, whatever the case may be. And in addition to that, you will have listening, speaking, reading, and writing objectives. You should be targeting things in particular. So they're going to be listening to the steps concerning or listening to the differences or the definitions of integers, or identifying, talking to their partners about examples of integers and whole numbers, reading an article or reading something and writing every day, so that we are practicing in a targeted way their acquisition of language, which should be concurrent with whatever content area you are currently teaching. And so the instruction starts in 3rd grade or higher. So this intensive, ongoing, foundational second language acquisition instruction in 3rd grade or higher. And so I am going to ask that you guys print out the standards and view some of the videos. I'm going to want to see your annotated notes. And let me see if I have the picture here. Sorry, not that. One of my students had just sent me hers, and it was so this is not the one that was really great, but it shows you the there's another one that was so ridiculously great with her annotation and breaking down what each of these meant. And there's so many videos where I've gone over and over. That wasn't the one I wanted to show you. Oh, well, in any event, you can do it however you want. Like I said, you can do it by making your notes along the side. So in this section, I would begin with what I need to know about students. What do I need to know about students? I need to know their different aspects and take those into consideration, right? And then go into deeper detail. What does that mean? Okay, well, it means that I need to plan using developmental characteristics and needs, paying attention to their needs, their characteristics, and what age group they're in and how that affects them developmentally. I need to make sure I pay attention to their varied backgrounds, that I adapt lessons. You see what it's asking you to do here? It's the correct answer on the exam is always going to be the teacher doing something from this right-hand column. The left is what you need to know. We just looked at most of this in deep detail with the cheat sheet. This is what you need to be able to do as far as planning for students. Plan lessons that reflect the understanding of the developmental characteristics, the needs, and what that even matters. Why we make certain choices with certain age groups and grade levels. Adapting lessons to address students' varied backgrounds, skills, interests, learning needs, including that of your English language learners. Using effective approaches to address varied student learning needs and preferences, their learning styles, the way that they learn best. Planning instruction that motivates students to want to learn and achieve. We just discussed what motivates a student. Acknowledging and respecting cultural and socioeconomic differences among students when you're planning instruction. It must be done. If they mention a cultural something, a nuance, diversity, or difference, please take that as a red flag or neon sign, as a devil in the detail in your scenario when you take the exam. They're trying to give you information about your students, what grade level are they at, what particular needs do they have, linguistic needs, what skills do they have, learning needs, so on and so forth. If they tell you about it in particular, it is because it needs to be particularly thought of or taken into consideration when you're choosing your answer choice. It is those details that make the difference between the two good answers that they, just horribly give you guys. They give you two good answers, but one is better than the other. One is more appropriate or best based on the particulars that they told you. And the correct answer will address the particulars, full stop. You'll see that it does. And so if you watch some of my videos, we go into deep detail going through Mr. Silas, you don't have these documents. If you do not, I apologize. You should have access to all of these documents. I'm going to make sure that that is rectified right now. I'm just going to put this for you in the chat box. If you could open it up in a link, open up in your browser and then save that browser link so that you'll have access to all of those things. There's a lot of good stuff there. In addition to the technology application standards, remember 1 through 7 do make a small appearance. They don't make up so much of the exam, but they do make a small brief appearance in standard, not standard 3, domain 3 with standard 3 and standard 1. Yes, sir. Let me also send for you. Actually, you know what? When we finish, I'll just send you the email because it's also going to have the link to that practice PPR exam that's available on the Pearson website that I'd like everyone to take so that we can assess your preparedness with what I think is the best practice test out there. It's by the test maker. So you can't get any closer to the exam than that. but I'm going to put this for you anyway here. I'm not sure if it'll let you take it again. That's a good question. I'm not, but if you've already taken it and we continue to work in those areas, like if you have access to it, I think you have access for 120 days. We could actually go in and look at some of those questions and just dissect them together. Actually look to see like what keywords and phrases did you overlook? Many times it's always the case with my students. They're like, oh my goodness, now I see it. Now that I saw that one word before the instruction takes place. They give you a time marker before, during, after. We do different strategies before we begin a lesson. We do different strategies during and after. So pay attention to the words that they use, that the specific words, that word choice that they use. The devil is in the detail. So for this first video, it's a long one. These first two are pretty long. They're really good though, especially this first one. I highly recommend you printing out your standards, sitting down with a pencil and markers and just taking notes and really delving into annotating your text, dialoguing with your text, rewriting those standard statements in your own words or jotting down examples when we bring them up in the videos, so that your brain takes, you're doing an exercise in metacognition. You're thinking about your thinking after having read it, putting it in your own words or saying it in a different way or writing examples helps solidify that knowledge and make that, again, neurological pathway retrievable for later. It's why we do tactile things with our students. It's why we have students utilize metacognition skills and have them think about their thinking, as I want for you to think about your thinking as you're reading the standards. So do you guys have any questions before we go? I know I kept you guys a little longer. I do apologize. Is everyone's good to go? No.
Yes, Miss Sauceda. Like always, good information. Thank you so much.
I see what you
Thank
did, Miss
you.
Sauceda. You gave us you gave us some time to think about it. Yeah, I see what you're doing. You gave us some thinking.
Yes,
see that.
absolutely. I'm giving you some extended wait time. No, but seriously, you guys let me know. I was using a software that I got out of my daughter uses it for her AP and college courses, my senior daughter. It's called Good Notes. And so I it's like a $7 app, I believe, but it's really great. And you can actually insert pictures and stuff like that. And so I really like it. I can take screenshots of things. And I'm not super tech savvy and I just got it. So I'm not, I haven't played with it so much, but I'm hoping to become more proficient and thereby making better notes for you guys to get ideas with. But it won't resonate if I do the notes and just sort of give them to you. Your brain does the magic when you piece it together yourselves. So I will see you guys next week. Hopefully more of you will have taken that exam, and then one of you can actually log in and we'll do some practice ones together utilizing the testing strategies, reading them carefully, identifying keywords and phrases concerning students and details about objective and the teacher goal, and then trying to see if we can figure out some of those areas of need that one or more of you had. All right, guys, I'm gonna say goodbye and you have a wonderful rest of your week. And I'll see you next week. Continue having happy holidays.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Miss Sauceda.
Yes,
Happy-
absolutely.
Have a happy New Year.
Yes, happy New Year, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.